let's restart. So this session on mixed ability and learner differences should take about an hour. It's a bit more like a traditional lecture, in which there are PowerPoints. I'll stop at different stages so you can answer questions and so on and do tasks. But if you miss anything or you don't get a concept, there'll be opportunities for questions at the end. So maybe you can note down your questions and we'll have a question and answer session. It is recorded, so you can go back and look at any definitions and so on. There's some terminology that you might not immediately grasp, so you might have to go back and check it. I'm going to send you, make sure that you have the handout on young learner characteristics. That's to do with the VAK, the different learning styles. All right, so let's get started. Now, a key concept here is differentiation. What is it and why is it important? Any idea? Has anyone heard of this concept before? Differentiation. Could you put your idea of what it means in the chat? What is your idea of what differentiation means? You may not have heard it before.
Yes.
But just have a guess. No problem with just guessing. Fabiola says the specific characteristic of each learner. Interesting, yeah. That's part of it. Differentiation means distinction, yeah, but distinction in what sense? Different teaching strategies with each learner, okay. Yeah, that's part of it. All right, lads. We're going to see an official definition. First of all, this is from the UK Ministry of Education 20 years ago, nearly. And it says, identifying and addressing the different needs, interests, and abilities of all learners to give them the best chance of achieving their learning goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's like a sort of official academic definition, but in ordinary words, I think it includes what you've just suggested. Differentiation is helping all students to make progress regardless of their starting points. It includes supporting the less confident and challenging. Challenge is like reto, isn't it? Retando, the stronger ones. And differentiation is the strategies, techniques, and activities that we use to support and scaffold. Anyone heard of this expression scaffold before? It's pretty important. Maybe we should talk about it before we go any further.
Scaffold is like improve, develop.
It's a metaphor.
Oh,
Yeah. Andamio. You know what andamio is?
okay.
Andamiaje. Yeah. What do we use andamio for? You're on mute, Ambar. Sorry, I can't hear you.
No, really?
Yeah. Now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Andamio is, you can use andamios or scaffolds when you try to get to the highest levels in a safe way.
Yes. Yeah. And
Well, and
andamio is like
metaphoric
metaphorically. Yeah.
is you have to reach or try to the others reach the highest levels.
Okay. But in concrete terms, what is andamio? In
And a
building,
structure.
in construction. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a structure.
It's a structure, isn't it? Yeah. That we
Yeah.
use to help build a building.
Mhm.
Once the building is built, then we withdraw the andamio, so the building can stand on its own. So that's part of the metaphor.
Mhm.
Yeah. Does anyone know the origin of this term andamio, of scaffolding?
Like etymological? No.
No, in terms of the in terms of the concept from educational theory. Do you know which educational theory is it associated with?
No, I don't know.
Has anyone heard of constructionism?
Yes. Isn't it
Yes.
Vygotsky's one? I don't remember.
Have you heard of social constructionism?
Yes.
I think is it constructivism, I think is the word. Social constructivism.
Mhm.
Have you heard of Vygotsky?
See, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where the theory was originated, but this idea of scaffolding comes from Brunner, 1976. Yeah. He was an Brunner. He was an American educationalist, psychologist, developmentalist, and he took the ideas of Vygotsky and developed them. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right, so support and scaffolding is an important part of differentiation. Now, how many ways do learners differ in a heterogeneous class? Hetero means difference, right? And which are likely to affect the way you teach them. So, in the chat, please think of some different ways that learners differ in the classroom. Here's one. Gender. Some are boys, some are girls. Right? Can you think of any other ones? Behavior, right? Age. Right. Come on. Don't be afraid. Just write in your suggestions in the chat. Manners. Learning approach. Yeah. Level of English. Yeah. Neurological conditions, right? Maybe mental health conditions. Yeah.
Yes,
Economic background, social and economic background.
emotional situation, yes.
Learning styles and so on. Good. Okay, so here are the list. I think these are the categories that Cambridge uses. So language learning ability, their language knowledge, cultural background, their learning preferences or learning styles, their attitude to the language. Do they have a positive or negative attitude towards learning English, for example? Their mother tongue. For Spanish speakers, it's especially here in Mexico, it's going to be easier to learn English than Koreans or Chinese to learn English because they're very different mother tongues. Their independence as learners, their self-discipline, the knowledge of other languages will help or hinder their age or maturity, their gender, personality, their confidence, their motivation, their interests, the world language, their learning experience, and their educational level. So in conclusion, all classes are heterogeneous, none are homogeneous. So we've got to be very careful to not treat students in our classrooms as somehow lacking individuality because they all have their individual differences. All right, so just quick review of learning styles. This is part of the TKT exam, part 1. So can you help me complete the crucigrama? Number 3 across.
The letter are small.
Yeah, they're very small.
Let me read it out for you. A learner who finds it easier to learn when they can see things written down or on a picture.
Visual,
Visual, yes, there you go.
auditory, can I say?
A
One
learner,
auditory
auditory is yes.
and 2 is
Auditory.
kinesthetics.
So a learner who learns more easily by doing things physically. Yeah, good. Now, I'd like you to do just take a short diversion here. I'd like you to do the questionnaire on learning styles, just to review them. I'll give you a few minutes to do your questionnaire. I've sent it to you in the
Yes.
chat. Yeah, and it's also in the email.
Mhm.
So you've got to choose the answer that describes you best, not what you think is the correct answer. Huh? When you're done, put your answers into the. When you're done, put your answers into the chat.
Okay.
May I choose two answers for one question?
Okay, then. Okay, Lulu, but you need to put your answers to each one. So if number one, are you A, B, or C?
Okay.
You're A. Okay, so then you put in the chat 1A, 2, maybe B. One. That's it. Thank you. So just waiting for Amber and Jessica to do the same. And Lulu. Okay, thank you.
In two, I have some problems.
That's all right. Great. All right. So let's check to see what the answers are then. Okay, so check your answers. If your answers are mostly A, you're an auditory learner. If your answers are mostly B, you're visual. Your answers are mostly K, you're kinesthetic. So Fabiola, what are you?
Well, I'm mostly auditive. This is not strange to me. I need to hear a lot of the things that I learn or that are meaningful to me.
Oh, good. Amber, what about you?
I'm kind of mix of all of them, but mostly visual and writing at the same time. I need to write a lot instead of here.
Jessica, what about you?
I'm still finishing. I'm still working on. But I think I have more letter B.
Okay, so mainly visual. And Lulu?
And more kinesthetic.
Kinesthetic. Right. Interesting differences. Sometimes it can be useful to do this with students to
Yes.
to figure out what their biases are. Yeah, because if you're highly biased towards one sort of learning, it can sometimes restrict you. Right? And sometimes you need to open up the
Yes, I am learning.
possibilities in other areas like auditory or kinesthetic, because a lot of people these days are highly visual. But you know, you learning some kinesthetic techniques for learning, such as reciting a poem while moving or dancing, can help you remember the poem. Did you know that? Yeah. Some people just not aware of these different strategies for learning that are associated with these learning preferences. All right, so let's now consider, let's just review some differences in age and experience. What are some of the different learner characteristics of children, teenagers, and adults? And what effect can learners' past experiences have on learner characteristics? Stop sharing for a second there. Escape. Okay, I'm going to put these questions into chat. Okay. So I'd like you to make a note of those questions. You can take a picture if you wish. Let me just put it on the board again, because I'd like you just to think about the different characteristics of children, teenagers, and adults, and what effect can learners' past experiences have on learner characteristics. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms with a learner, with someone different from last time. So let's have Jessica and Lulu and Amber and Fabiola. Okay. Just a brief discussion about these differences between children, teenagers, and adults, and what effect those differences might have on their learning characteristics. Jessica, are you having problems?
So you want to start?
Yes. The first question.
Yeah.
What are some of the different learner characteristics of children, teenagers, and adults? I think it depends. For example, in my case, it depends about the environment, the attitude to learn a new language, how they feel in the group, if they feel ashamed, if they feel embarrassed, and if they don't want to learn English. This is a challenge for us.
Yeah. Maybe when they are like blocked because of bad experience or because of the parents' pressure, it's really difficult to get them out of that. Yeah, I'm totally agree with you.
Yes, it's very difficult. And if you in this age, for example, when they are like 9 to 12, is more difficult.
Yeah.
Students, like one of my kids, sometimes I tell you tell him something and he doesn't question anything. And I'm like, no, but why? So I have to do the exercise of why are we switching, for the regular verb when we add an S? Or I have to guide him, like to try in that kind of critic in his head that start to make the understanding of why we're making this kind of adjustment. And for example, with the adults, what I have to do is to identify their motivation, like why are they learning English, like what is their interest? Because if you teach them just the rules, the grammar, they get bored and it's not meaningful. Like they need to be like practical. They need things to be significant in some way so they can keep track with the learning. More than them setting them the basis is more like making the language, like focusing them function more than like the structures and such. Maybe I could have a beginner, but in the same time I have to keep him like very specific examples that he could rely on what he has lived before.
Yeah. I was reading these concepts, and for example, as you said, adults need teachers need to focus with adults, for example, with lexical approach, because vocabulary, no, all they want is to communicate. They don't need your grammar structures, no.
If they don't like it.
Yes, and children's, for the other way, you have to set the rules, to establish the grammar, the structures, because and also children are taking English classes for a program education, it's the rule, no, you have to do it and that's it. And adults, they have a motivation. Yes.
For example, with kids, I have found a better response with working with fantasy, working with now video games or tales, because they can relate better to the character they're speaking. With teenage.
Azul. Okay, yes, but give me the meaning in English, not in Spanish, because if you translate, you get confused and you start thinking some other things, and they are like, but I know it in Spanish. Yes, but speak in English, you can do it. Yeah, it's really complicated when they come from this easiest way of learning, and now you want to teach them how to think and how to answer, and they are not interested at all.
Yes, for example, sometimes I tell them, please get out your notebook and write the structure, subject plus verb. How? So I have to write it. Yes, you have to write. No, miss. Yes. They don't want to write. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to sing. They don't want to practice. And when I ask them, please go here, come here close to me and write in the whiteboard, it means like if I was doing something, I don't know, in the other planet. I don't know what.
And you're like, oh, come on, let's work. And they're like, no, please. And you're like,
Yes. And for example, we use a platform, and I think that is one of the big reasons. In my case, I only use the platform like a tool, but they meeting is being recorded.
Some interesting discussion there. Let's get some feedback. So, Jessica, you were saying, Jessica and Lulu, you were saying that one of the biggest challenges that you face is like the motivation for the young learners, right? Why?
Yeah, the motivation, but it's because we agreed in this part of they come from a kind of teaching where they always have the answer. They didn't have to think how to solve the problems. And now that we want that they think, that they answer and exercise, they don't want to think, they don't have this attitude to make something different. They are always waiting, like, oh, come on, you tell me the answer, or why do I have to write or to use the books, or they only want the easiest way to work.
What did you answer the second question?
Yeah, that was our second question.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah. Oops, sorry. Jessica, can you tell the first one, please?
What are some of the different learner characteristics of children, teenagers, and adults? Well, it's related with the second one. And I told Luma in my case, for example, it depends on the environment, the previous experience they have had in the other grade, and the structure in the classroom. I think there are a lot of things that can infer in this part. So it's very important that you observe, that you watch each one, and how is the dynamic in the group. Because if you want to do something with each one, it's very difficult.
Sure. So you're anticipating what's going to come next in this presentation. It's about how do we differentiate. That's very good. Oops. So in Amber and Fabiola's, what did you discuss? How did you answer these two questions?
We discussed about it in a very good way, because Fabiola has experience to teach both adults and children. And she said, I have to, as a teacher, I have to switch myself, because it's obviously that you teach children in a way, adults in other. Depends, the adults have to learn English because they have a motivation, a particular specific motivation or goal. And children do that because, okay, this is a structure of the school, no? Or the system, academic system. There is a difference, and adults have paradigmas, stereotypes, and children are more like white paper, no?
Yeah.
They receive everything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Any of the points that you'd like to make, Fabiola? Fabiola and Amber, before I give you some suggested answers to these two questions.
Yes, just to complement our talk, Amber. For example, speaking about any learner, I think it has to do with the relationship that you build with the language. If for you you already have an experience that it was hard for you, or you received feedback that wasn't kind, or it was impositive, or it was like instead of turning you up, it turned you down, the relationship with the language is going to be then a barrier on itself. So I think that's for the answer number 2. And maybe with kids, it's more likely to maybe turn the wheel and try to redirect them. But with adults, it's more challenging because they already had a lot of more experiences that maybe reassured
Yeah.
that idea that they have.
Yeah, great. I'm glad you're drawing on your own experiences here. So some of the learner characteristics of children, teenagers, and adults. So you'll find that there are differences in the length of time that they can pay attention or concentrate. Their ability to stay still is much less with children. Their ability to control their own behavior is less with children. Their attitude to making mistakes, the tolerance for making mistakes is usually less with adults, right? Because sometimes they don't like making mistakes, adults. Whereas with children, yeah, they just make the mistake and move on. Sometimes teenagers, though, they can be quite self-conscious about making mistakes, can't they? So that comes into the levels of self-consciousness, which is higher with teenagers. They don't want to to appear foolish in front of their classmates. Oops. And the ability to bring life experiences to learning, which is more an adult characteristic. So what effect can learners' past learning experiences have on learner characteristics? The previous experience of learning may be very different to the approach taken by the current teacher. Now, this change may be welcomed, or it may not be welcomed. It might be disturbing for some learners. Some learners may have tried to learn a language before and failed, more of a characteristic of adults, right? So that they have fear of failure. Yeah, they're sure that they're going to fail. Learners may have fixed ideas about the best way of learning. Again, that could be adults, couldn't it? Whereas children tend not to be so fixed about what is the best way of learning. All right. Let's move on to some myths of differentiation. So here are some common myths of differentiation. It's all about individualized instruction, not necessarily. That it's chaotic, not necessarily. It's just another way to provide homogeneous grouping. Nope. That it's tailoring the same suit of clothes. Not necessarily. And it's just for learners who struggle. No, because you can apply it to more advanced learners as well. So, does differentiation lead to teacher burnout? Because you're spending a lot of time preparing your lessons. Does it lead to death by worksheet? No, it doesn't. Because we can simply adapt tasks, and it's easier than you might think. All right. So let's start with open-ended tasks. Right. Now, open-ended tasks are where there's more than one acceptable answer. Or they can be approached by more than one way of thinking. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a little task to do here. Activity A. Choose the most acceptable alternative. All right. Then do activity B. A good teacher comes to class on time can you suggest other things a good teacher does? So I'm going to give you a Google Doc to work on in the I'm going to give it to you through the chat, and I'd like you to put your answers on there. So here it is, coming into the chat now. Please click on, give me the thumbs up when you have it. Yeah, this is what it looks like. So have a go. Attempt the activities. See what you notice. Right. Activity A, the most acceptable answer is C, as you noticed. A good teacher comes to class on time. Whereas activity B, all of these are correct, aren't they? This is what a good teacher does. Prepares materials, keeps it attractive and meaningful, takes care of students, works with different strategies, makes lessons interesting, smiles, explains well. Now, obviously, a less able student, so a weak student could say a good teacher smiles, right? But you being more advanced students of English, you have more complicated, complex answers, right? So activity B does not have a single predetermined right answer, but a potentially unlimited number of acceptable responses. It is naturally differentiated. It's differentiation friendly. Whereas closed-end cues like A are by their nature homogeneous. They provide valuable learning for a limited range of learners, those who have just about managed the relevant language and can rehearse it successfully given a cue like this. Learners who are at a lower level and who have not yet mastered the language will either not respond at all or are quite likely to get the answer wrong. It might be useful to clarify what they need to work on in the future, but they will have got no useful practice. The more advanced learners are also neglected. In this activity A, the item is easy and boring, with no opportunity to show what they can do or engage with language of an appropriate level. So it's a limited sort of activity, and activity B is more, well, it has a lot more potential. So we mentioned differentiation friendly. According to Roberts, 2016, and the reference is available at the end. A task is more differentiation friendly when it's open, when it provides choices in terms of challenge. It provides choices in terms of quantity. It allows for personalization. I'm sure you've heard of that expression before, personalization, or speaking from within. It requires interaction with others. Okay, now we mentioned this word challenge. Sometimes we need to provide challenge for more advanced students. Okay, so when we're differentiating by task, we can adapt more. We can give students broadly the same task, so we don't have to make different worksheets for all the students in the class. But we can give different levels of challenge or support. Let's look at activity X. Can you provide the appropriate relative pronouns here? What about A? What's the right answer here?
When.
I dislike people when talk all the time. What's the right relative pronoun? What relative pronoun do we use with human beings?
Whom?
Who? We use whom when there's an object, right? When it's the object, but it's who though. What about B?
That.
That or which, right?
Which
Yeah.
finish.
That have
When
happy
have
endings.
happy endings.
That is the road.
That.
Yeah. That or which.
Or which. Yeah.
That or which. Both are correct. You won't enjoy the film.
That or which?
That's or
Which.
which.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
The woman who.
Who arrives.
Yeah, it has to be who, doesn't it? Because it's a person. All right, let's have a look at activity X. So this is the way we can make that activity X more challenged by converting it into activity Y. All right, so we can, well, first they've got to choose the right pronoun, but then complete the sentences in your own way. Okay, so I'm going to nominate one of students to do one sentence. So Fabiola, can you do A? I dislike people. You've got to choose the correct pronoun and complete the sentence in your own way. Jessica, B. Amber, C. And Lulu, D. And I'll do E. So write your answer in the chat. Ben, anything, but you need to complete it in your own way. In the meantime, Fabiola, tell us why you dislike people who are shallow.
Well, I don't like talking about drama or like with not enough meaning toward things. Like if I see people who are more into the looks or are more into having brands, for me, that's a waste of time. I would rather talk about meaningful things, even if there are small things like a book, like music, something that you're passionate about, rather than comparing each other like, oh, I have this blouse of, I don't know, Hugo Boss. I don't really, I find that boring.
Oh, good. Jessica, you say the best stories are ones which are about emotional support. Why?
Why? Well, in my case, I think in this period, in this age, when they are pre-teenagers, if they can learn that this is a situation that they are going to live, but they are going to change in one moment, and they can develop some skills to yes, to take this part in the best way. I think they can learn how to live this part in his or her life.
Oh, good. Interesting ideas there. Amber, that is
Yes.
the road which the the Beatles walked on is now, it's now a famous place. Do you know what it's called, that road?
No, I forget. I forgot.
The name of the album is Abbey Road.
Abbey Road, yes.
Yeah.
Like the album, yeah.
What are the Beatles doing on that road?
What we're doing?
What are the Beatles doing on that road?
Just walking? No?
Yeah, but what are they walking on?
And the walking lines? I don't know.
Do you know what that's called?
No.
It's called a zebra crossing.
Zebra crossing.
Zebra
okay.
crossing. Why do you think it's called a zebra crossing?
Because of the colors and the
Yeah, the black and
the-
white,
the-
right?
yeah.
Right.
the shapes.
Okay, and Lulu, you won't enjoy the film which is about the terrorist. Why not?
Maybe it's so dramatic or with a lot of blood. I don't know.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so what did you notice about activity Y? Why is it more challenging, and why does it provide more personalization, do you think?
I think why? Because they have to think on the second part of the sentence.
Uh-huh.
So they have to use their previous knowledge.
Yeah, their own ideas. Yeah. It also allows for personalization, doesn't it? Because yeah, they can finish it in their own way and make it their own. And it can be a good conversation starter as well, can't it, this? Yeah, notice I was asking you follow-up questions to generate a conversation.
Yeah, this activity.
So it's there's more openness,
Mhm.
permits more challenge. So basically, the more closed an activity is, the more support you're giving, the more open you make it, where mistakes could be anything, the more challenging it is. Right? Here's another control practice activity. If you look at it, it's kind of duh, right? Doctor works in a hospital, teacher gives lessons. A police officer catches thieves. Driver drives a car. Farmer milks cows. Yeah, not very challenging, is it? But how could you improve it to make it more challenging?
Maybe you could do a research of popular people who do this and use images and or videos and try to instead of just the words like that. For example, if it is a doctor, I don't know, let's put Doctor Who. The Doctor Who there.
Yeah.
Then teacher, it could be a picture of ourselves, no? The teacher, and you say hi. A farmer, and maybe you put an image of someone on the milk. I don't know. And maybe it could be a role play. Like now you're gonna be, instead of me being the picture, the teacher, you're gonna be me. Like, what do I do? And how do I move, or what tools do I use? And the same for the doctor. Now you're gonna be the doctor, I'm gonna be the patient. What would you do? I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. I like that idea. Now, Penny who devised this activity, suggests you could get them in working in pairs or groups. In an online context, that would be in the breakout room, and tell them they can combine any item from column A, any item from column A with any item in column B, if they can justify it. Now, the original obvious combinations are still available for less confident or slower students.
Mhm.
There is also the possibility of suggesting that a farmer listens to lectures. So you've got alternatives, right? Farmer listens. Or gives lessons, right, on farming. Or police officer, maybe he could give lessons on road safety or the functions of the police force. Yeah. So another side benefit of this activity is the breaking of stereotypes implicit in the original activity, right? Get them to break stereotypes with their imagination. Another option is you could delete column A and ask students to think of a subject to go with a predicate, or you could delete column B and just have column A and leave it open. Okay, so here are some ways. That's another way you can adapt these controlled practice activities. They seem a little bit mechanical, don't they, sometimes for students? So sometimes they need to use their more imaginations and creativity, especially the more advanced ones. All right, now let's have a look at how do we differentiate for skills, because that was about mainly language. So regarding reading, we could, to provide support, we can give students answers in a mixed order with a few distractors. All right, so they've got to choose from the reading task and the questions. You have the questions, but the answers are you provide the answers, but in a mixed order. So they have to choose from the right answer. It's a bit like multiple choice. You can make open questions, WH questions. What was the speaker's attitude? Instead of WH, you can make them multiple choice of true or false. That's easier, usually. To make more challenge, you can get them to select 3 items of vocabulary. Students look them up in the dictionaries and write them with definitions. Listening. Support, have the audio script ready. It's usually in the teacher's guide somewhere or at the back of the student's book. In a gap fill, you can provide some of the words needed. For challenge, when students listen for the second time to confirm answers, give optional extra questions. When taking answers on a true or false activity, ask why or why not. That usually works better when the answer is false. So why was it false? Yeah, you need to probe them. Writing. In terms of support, give a model or example before they start writing. Correct the draft with the student or in pairs before rewriting. Challenge, use correction code in Microsoft Word comments to give them a chance to self-correct.
It's good.
Like, for example, you could say WO, word order, right? So there's something wrong with word order there. Can you correct? Challenge students to use a variety of linkers, but also, however. Speaking. And support, they're doing a speaking task, let the students rehearse. You can get them to send you a recording, you can give them audio feedback. Elicit and practice the language they'll use beforehand, before the speaking task. Challenge, get students to justify their opinions. You can pair high-level students together so they can really stretch themselves. All right, so that's skills, but we can also differentiate with our classroom management. Pair work can be used as in or group work, and it's more likely to differentiate because students can work at their own level and they can support and learn from each other. However, having weaker students and stronger students working together has advantages and disadvantages. What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of having weak students work with strong students?
The strongest won't let the other guy speaks.
That's right. So the strong one dominates, right?
Strong one dominates, yes. And the weaker has fear to make mistakes. Increase
Yeah.
the shy. Mhm. Get intimidated. Mhm.
So those are the disadvantages. Are there any advantages of having stronger weak ones together? There must be some advantages of having strong and weak students together.
Yeah, sometimes according to their personality, sometimes the strong one can like pull the other one
Yeah.
and get to that level.
Yeah, that's right. So the stronger one can consolidate its own knowledge his or her own knowledge by instructing the weaker student. Huh? So that's useful. Teaching is a great way of learning, right? So the strong can teach the weaker ones, and the weaker one has support. The level can be brought up.
Yeah, and I think it's safer for them. As a student, I think I feel more confident when I'm like I can see what my stronger partner is doing, and then I just copy or realize something instead of being corrected in front of everyone.
So it's recommended though that you mix things up. Okay, so there's not always the same pairing. Why? Well, the stronger one can resent its role. Stronger student can resent its role. So you need to have the strong students working with strong students occasionally as well. Yeah? What tasks can you give to the stronger student? Well, Jill Hadfield, in her book Classroom Dynamics, she recommends assigning roles such as the scribe. Scribe is the writer, right? So you give the strong student the role of the scribe, and the student takes notes while the others talk, and then the scribe gives feedback, gives the report at the end. Yeah, that way the dominant one doesn't talk, and the weaker one gets a chance to think. Yeah? So giving strong students like scribe. Yeah. Okay, so that's how you can differentiate in classroom management. We can also differentiate in our speaking as teachers. So we can differentiate with our questioning techniques. Has anyone heard of Bloom's taxonomy of thinking skills? Is that familiar to you?
Not for me.
Well, the idea is that some thinking skills are more difficult to do, more challenging than other thinking skills. Like, for example, remembering and understanding, less challenging than creating and evaluating. So the idea is that for the weaker students, you ask questions that are more on the lower order thinking skills, right? Such as an example would be to asking students to describe or define something, right? As a lower order thinking skill. Yeah? So describe a tiger. Yeah, it's got stripes, so on. It's orange, it's fierce, right? Now, at the other end, the higher order thinking skills are questions that are more stretching, require deeper understanding. These kinds of questions ask students to judge or critically appraise, right? So, stronger students. What is the role of the tiger in the ecosystem? How important is the role of the tiger as a predator? Does it keep the ecological balance? Yeah. So already that's a much more challenging sort of question, isn't it? Huh? So questioning techniques are important parts of our role as differentiators. All right, a motivation. Okay, so here are some principles regarding struggling learners. We've got to bear in mind that we need to believe in the children's hidden capacities. We teach with a growth mindset. We look for the struggling learners' positives. Remember that success brings success. Work for learning in context. So don't be too abstract. Okay, you need lots of context. Go for powerful learning. Learners in the middle. Every human needs to feel that they're unique. We teach with a growth mindset. We teach the productive habits of mind and work. Teaching up. So get them to be aspirational. And advanced learners. We need to challenge advanced learners to challenge themselves. Increase support to match their expectations. We need to get them to take pride in quality work and satisfaction. And satisfaction in la lucha. We need to help children to know how to achieve quality. We've got to get a balance between hard work and the pleasure of learning. Any questions about differentiation, mixed ability before we finish on this topic?
No, not me. I was thinking in an activity that I made. It's not a question, it's just a comment about the last number 5, the last sentence. You have to make the stronger learners work with fun and joy.
Yeah.
Once I work with the smart ones and with the not smart, but the students that make a mess. I put it together and I said, you have to make a card with recyclable materials, and the messes were the leaders of the activity. They could resolve the problem, and the smart were like, I don't know how to do. I don't know. Can I look for in Google how to do? No, you have to you use your imagination, and the other guys completely solved the problem, and they made the card. And the others were like, oh no, I don't know everything. Yes, you don't, and you have to learn to others. And the not smarter, they felt confident because they won the activity. They did the activity. You know what I mean? And I liked that activity.
Right. It sounds like a very good example of differentiation. So just to sum up some ideas,
Mhm.
It's not about accepting that some students can't do parts of the lesson. And it's not about making lots of different worksheets to try to help all of the students. But we can be, when we're sitting down to plan, we need to be aware of the different needs of students. And adapt slightly the tasks so that there's challenge or support. And it's about how we ask and respond to questions. One thing I didn't mention was that sometimes when we ask questions, we need to give more time for the weaker students to think of the answers. Right? And it's been shown through educational research that instead of waiting just 1.5 seconds after you ask a question, if you wait 3 seconds, you can get longer and more complex answers from students because you give them more thinking time. Okay, and here is a link to some more sources for you regarding differentiation. It's got some of the references mentioned on this and mentioned in the presentation. So that's how to do skills, the references here, some general articles about differentiation, mixed ability classes. All right, wow. We've got another break. 15-minute break. So I'd like us to please to return at 12:30. Okay, and then we'll do our final part, which is setting up activities. All right.